the sum of its parts represents something that simply doesn't exist in the modern world anymore. And I had no clue what that was when I got it. So about 2 years ago, I convinced myself that I needed a new daily driver. And we as petrol heads, we obviously want the best compromise of function and style. And usually style is heavily contradicting the function part and the budget part. So I sensibly should have looked at a Golf Mark IV, which you can get for dirt cheap today, has aircon, every bit of commodity that you want for really cheap. But instead, because I'm not afraid of maintenance and I know it's gonna break down at some point and I have to do something, I was like, I can go to the mid-80s. And now I have a 205 GTI. In the state that I bought it in, it wasn't drivable at all. Like, brakes were sticking, everything was just old and cruddy, but the base I thought was there. Unfortunately, whoever worked on it previously never put it together right. The engine was wired and plumbed completely incorrectly, like oil vapor hoses going to coolant outlets and all that sort of a thing. Because those engines have a really convoluted oil breather system, and it's like none of this made any sense. And I didn't see that, obviously, because I'd never worked on a Peugeot before. I knew I had to do suspension and brakes and all of that, but that whole thing with the engine it drove me nuts. Because I assumed that someone would have done something right. And the smart move would have just been to remove it entirely. And in the process that I worked on the thing, I also took apart the spare original engine that came with the car. Now, upon taking off the cylinder head of that, it was very clear that that would not be the quick solution to the problem. And so after changing basically every bit of consumable and like an alternator, a starter, and like going through every exterior thing short of taking it out, and 2 fuel pumps, it then finally ran. And so the one time I set out to actually buy something sensible, I instead made the same mistake I'd made on all my previous vehicles, but somehow worse. This car has 105 horsepower, or 103, or in this case, probably less. It weighs about 850 kilograms, and it has absolutely zero electronic whatevers, apart from an ECU that basically only tells the injectors to dump fuel into it. And every bit of control that this vehicle has is analog, and I wouldn't call it weightless, but because the entire car is so light, like you have an incredible progression in every bit of input. And because they nailed so many elements of how the mechanicals feel, you all of a sudden you brake way later, or you don't brake at all. And you turn way sharper than you would normally do. And even though it's front-wheel drive and that's often frowned upon for a performance vehicle, it's such a defining characteristic of that whole thing, this, I would almost call it French performance flimsiness. And that's really addictive. We've become so far removed from what these cars were when they were new that almost no point of comparison really still stands. Every bit of it has evolved or changed so much that you feel like you literally transform into a different world when you step into it. My name is David, and I somehow ended up with a Peugeot 205 GTI.